Welcome back to the Empire Builders podcast. Dave Young here, alongside Stephen Semple, and Stephen just told me what we're going to talk about today, and it's not really. I mean, it's an empire, sort of. It's an empire in terms of its category, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's not so much like you can't put your finger on a brand name for it, and that's so we're talking
Correct.
about movie concessions and how things got started. So, I'm guessing in the early days, you didn't buy a big old thing of popcorn. You just sat down and watched the movie.
No, that was what I found that's what I found interesting about this, and I thought, and when I went down it, I was actually researching one particular business, and then what I suddenly realized is that, no, there's a couple of things that converged together that really made the modern movie concession, and there's 3 players that went into this, and all 3 of them ended up building fortunes in the process, and that's
Okay.
Joseph Blumenthal, Jack Beresin, and Milton Holloway all kind of came together to make, movie concessions happen. As we know, today movie concessions are like a multi-billion dollar business and concession sales are like close to half of movie theater profits.
Well,
So
sure.
they're a big deal.
Where I am in Austin, we're, I don't know, half a mile from an Alamo Draft House, and I don't go to the theater as often as I did before all the things. But Alamo Draft House is known for pioneering, you have a menu, you sit down, you order a meal while you're and they'll
Right.
bring it to you in the theater.
Yes.
We've always known that you're gonna spend more on popcorn and drinks than you did on the movie ticket.
And they've taken it to a whole other level, but wasn't always that way, Dave. And June 19th, 1905
1905.
was the first movie, like the
Okay.
first movie showing kind of in a theater sort of setup, and they were called Nickelodeons. That's what they called the early movie houses because it was a nickel and
Yeah.
all that other stuff, and it was super successful, and pop-ups started happening, all over the place, and as we know, the early movies were silent. So what would happen is people would buy a ticket to go to the movie, like vendors would buy a ticket to go to the movie, and they would walk up and down the aisle going, "Popcorn, popcorn, who wants?" And selling stuff just like they did at the ball games.
Or the
And there was
circus, yeah.
but there was no connection to the theater. These were like literally Dave Young would buy a ticket, show up, and then basically walk up and down the aisle selling whatever food he had to sell.
And they just let him.
So concessions were not a thing at all, at
Okay.
all. So Jack Barrison is working at an opera house and he's looking at a way to make some extra money. And he saw people buying and eating food at a Nickelodeon. So he approaches his manager with the idea of at this opera house now, you can't go up and down the aisles in the opera house. The whole idea of let's set up a table and do concessions during the intermission.
Sure.
Now, eating in an opera house was kinda considered uncouth, and his manager was a little bit resistant to the idea until Jack said to him, "Guess what? I'll split the profits with you 50-50." Suddenly, he's like, "Yeah, let's give this idea a try."
Okay.
So, it turns out to be so successful that Jack sets up concession stands in 9 different opera houses. Now we enter the 1920s, and the movie industry is exploding, like, to the point where wealthy people didn't used to go to movies. That was, like, a working man's thing. Well, now what ends up happening in the 20s is that wealthier people start going to the movies, and they start building these things called movie palaces start to open. And, like, in the
Mm.
1920s, they built, like, 5,000 of these get built in the 1920s, and they're really elegant. So think Grauman's Chinese Theater. Like,
Yeah,
they're
there's
super
th
elegant.
the one that always pops into my head, there's a theater, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's in Santa Barbara, California, and it's one of these just gorgeous old theaters with ornate balconies and constellations painted on the ceiling,
Yeah, they're
right? The
beautiful.
glitter, yeah, yeah,
They're
amazing.
absolutely beautiful. They really are, and anytime you have a chance to it's not many around any longer, but anytime you get a chance to visit one, it's, like, well worth doing. So, the vendors hawking stuff in the aisles are gone, A, because now they're talking, and B, they're now opulent. So, Jack sees an opportunity in the movie theaters to do the concession idea, but he wants to do something that is easy, scalable, and he can take national. So, he comes up with the idea of selling concessions not using people, but vending machines.
Oh, wow, okay.
So comes up with this idea of selling concessions, not using people, but vending machines. And vending machines this time are pretty popular, but they're not being used for food. You can buy stamps, as we talked about some of
Uh-huh.
the early tobacco ones, cigarettes, but they haven't been used for food yet. So he plans to install these in movie theaters and dispense popcorn, Cracker Jacks, and peanuts.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the theater owners, especially ones with these theater palaces, are against the idea of popcorn and peanuts because they make a
A
mess.
mess. Yeah.
Right. Enter Joseph Blumenthal. So now we need to go back a few years.
Okay.
Let's go back to the early 1920s. And Blumenthal's family business makes extracts, to flavor things, right? And
Okay.
by the early 1900s, this has become a really crowded space. There's like over 400 companies that do this business. But Joseph saw an opportunity in chocolate. But what he wanted to do was make chocolate powder, the ingredients for baking
Uh-huh.
and things along that lines, which also means he wasn't going to be competing heavily with Hershey, who's in his area. So they pour their savings into this venture. But the problem is they know nothing about chocolate.
Okay.
And so they hire this German immigrant with a chocolate background and they have to fire him because he shows up every day drunk for work. And they have all the equipment and the cocoa beans and no one to make it. And they're close to running out of money and they end up, finding somebody to extend them a line. But they slowly get started and get the formula right. And they start
Uh-huh.
making this chocolate powder. But then they also start looking at the consumer market. And in the 1920s, consumer chocolate starts getting crowded because there's a few titans that are dominating it, but combination bars start entering the marketplace. Like think Mars, right? Where it's not just
Okay. Yeah.
like Hershey's was just chocolate. And to go back, episode 175 and 176, we talked a lot about that
Uh-huh.
with Mars. So, but what they decide to do is do this big drum with chocolate and put other things in it, like seeds and nuts and things like that, and have it being coated. And they thought, well, this would be a great idea because it's a new and different idea. It's not a bar, it's these little individual little bites.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really do all that well until they meet Jack Beresin, who has a problem. I want to sell things through a machine,
Uh-huh.
but the stuff I want to sell is messy. Wouldn't these little chocolate covered raisins and peanuts and things along that lines be perfect for selling in a concession,
And we can put the
like vending machine?
yeah, we can package them in a little cardboard box so that the vending machine doesn't have trouble with it, like an envelope or a packet of some kind.
That's
They stack
exactly what
nicely like packs of cigarettes.
that's exactly what he does, Dave.
Uh-huh.
They create these little cardboard boxes. He puts these candies in it. This would be perfect for vending machine, and they're not messy. They're each little individual pieces, right?
The Raisinets and the Goobers.
Bingo.
Uh, and
Exactly. Raisinets
they
and
coat them
goobers.
in wax so they don't melt on your fingers.
And that's exactly what they were called.
Yeah,
This is the origin of
yeah.
Raisinets and Goobers. Bingo, right on.
Oh, those were
So
my core
now
values when I was a kid. Raisinets and Goobers.
so Jack goes back to the theaters because now he has these candies rather than peanuts and popcorns, and there's still lots of pushback on the idea. Then he remembers what he had did with his manager at the opera house, right?
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Social post?
Yep.
Grinding it out?
Yep. Content treadmill.
Are you getting hearts and likes?
Sometimes, just a little bit.
You're consistent?
Daily, just like my coffee.
They're entertaining?
I think so.
So?
You think it's worth it?
Don't know. Ask the host.
This podcast host?
Yep. Oh, and you can book your free starter session on this podcast website.
Take it away, Dave.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
So Jack goes back to the theaters because now he has these candies rather than peanuts and popcorns, and there's still lots of pushback on the idea. Then he remembers what he had did with his manager at the opera house, right?
Oh, yeah, splitsies.
Sharing the profits.
Uh-huh.
He goes back with the idea, sharing cut of the concession. Bingo. So he's now got theaters loving it. It's easily scalable. It's the late 1920s, and profits are literally hitting $1,000 a week per theater. That's how
All
much
right.
money they're making,
That's a
right?
lot of Goobers.
Yeah. Now, others start copying the idea. The Lumenthals are being approached to sell candies to them. And Beresin also realizes he needs to expand his options. Like
Okay.
he needs some additional things. 1929 happens. Of course, there's the crash. There's one out
Uh-huh.
of 4 people unemployed, but they have time on their hands. and movies are kind of an inexpensive escape. So people are still going to movies, and they also want a small treat, but what they would like something that kinda lasts,
Mm,
right? Make that money last. Enter Milton Holloway.
okay.
Remember we said there was 3 people in this
Yeah.
story. So Milton's in Chicago, and he had bought a small defunct caramel company with a $1,200 loan from his dad. Family didn't really like the idea because Milton had no candy experience.
And he bought a defunct caramel. Okay. Okay.
So the first thing he made was this thing called a slowpoke, which is basically a caramel on a stick with a wax paper
Uh-huh.
wrapper.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is you could take the wrapper off, have a little bit, put the wrapper back on. And he started playing around with chocolate covered caramels. But caramels were always sold in cubes, and he wanted to stand out. So how about a marble shaped caramel covered in chocolate? Well, it turns out round balls of caramel are hard to make.
Mm,
And when hot chocolate hits the round caramel, it won't hold its shape.
okay.
He plays around with this for 2 years trying to get it to
It
work.
sounds like a dud.
Exactly. They would say, "Another batch of duds."
Yeah.
But it tasted good, though, and
Yeah.
suddenly what he realized is, doesn't matter what it looks like, it tastes great, and he decides to lean into the funny shape, and he calls them
Milk duds.
Milk Duds.
Yeah. I mean, they also won't if you drop one on the floor at your feet in the theater, it won't roll away.
I hadn't even thought
Y
about that benefit,
I don't know
unlike the
why you'd
goober.
ever reach down and pick something up off the floor of a theater and
So, and again, initially sales are slow. They're not really doing all that great. And he's literally on the brink of failure. And he's discovered by Beresin because Beresin's looking for new ideas for the vending machine. And not only that, once it gets in the vending machine and people get exposed to it, sales of it takes off.
Mhm.
By the 1940s, theaters are basically being built with concession stands built into them, so the vending machines sort of goes away, but Barristan continues to supply them, adds lots of new products. By the 1960s, they're doing 100 million in sales, and today movie concessions are a huge, huge part of the movie business, and it was really these 3 guys coming together, that made it happen. It was Jack Barrison coming up with the idea of concessions in the opera houses because what he saw going on in the Nickelodeons, then deciding to make it a vending machine, but popcorn and peanuts wouldn't work, which ironically, popcorn is now back in theaters.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Joseph kinda making these chocolate covered candies and Jack going, "That would be perfect for vending machines," and then expanding the lines with the Milk Duds from, Milton Holloway. So I thought it was a really kinda interesting story because it was
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was a combination of these 3 characters that made it all work.
I'm trying to think of the others, like Mike and Ike's and Hot Tamales.
Yeah, all
They're
those
they're
things
all
came later.
and
Yeah.
they're all in that little box,
Yes.
and they still sell them in the little box as far as I can
Yes. They
recall,
do.
and so
Yeah.
that's sort of a legacy thing to, all of those things being purchased out of vending machines.
Yes, so when you take a look at that packaging, yes, think back to that would be perfect in a vending machine, and
Yeah.
that is the legacy. That is where they all started was in these vending machines in movie theaters. But what I loved, especially Jack, I particularly really was inspired by Jack in this because you take a look at what Jack did. Jack saw the food in the Nickelodeon and went,
Yeah.
"Wow, we should do this in the opera house, but we'll do it a little bit differently, a little bit more upscale. We'll have a nice table. We'll display the things in a different manner." And then movies take off and the feel of movies change and wealthy people start going to movies. In other words, Jack's customers start going to movies. Jack goes, "I should do this in movie theaters, but let's make it more scalable." You know, vending machine. And but then even when he got the pushback of, "Well, we're not gonna do popcorn and peanuts in it," didn't make him stop. He didn't go, "Oh, this idea is no good. Alright, I will find something different to sell."
Mhm. Mhm.
And then next thing was, well, we're still unsure to do it, and he remembered his conversation with his manager. "Well, let's share in the profits." "Okay, great, let's do it."
Yeah.
There was this big circle that all this learning to continue to go round. I just thought it was really cool.
It really is, and, it's been the backbone of the theater industry, right? It's as far as profits, that it's a weird thing going on these days post-pandemic is that you get the feeling movie theaters are not gonna be with us forever. Um,
Which
and
is a sad thought to me.
it
I
really
enjoy
is.
going to movie theaters, yeah.
I enjoy it, but I haven't been to one in a couple years.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I
Yeah.
go every few
I
months.
I have one across the street from me practically, and,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
like, if they'd give me a pause button. I've been tell Milton and the guys to see if they could figure out a way to, more intermissions. 'Cause that's the thing is,
Well
right, you lost the intermission, and, we haven't had those for years.
well, and I actually think so if there's anybody in the movie industry listening to this,
Uh-huh,
especially where some movies have now started to get particularly long, right? Like,
uh-huh,
we are starting to get these 3-hour epic movies, and it amazes me that they do not have an intermission in those movies. Because
uh-huh.
on top of that, not only would an intermission make it more enjoyable and give, people an opportunity to have a washroom break, they would go buy more concessions.
That was the whole
Like,
idea.
I don't get it. I
Yeah,
don't get why there's not an intermission, and I think that's a mistake that the movie industry is making. They need to bring back especially if it's longer than a 2-hour movie, they need to
mhm.
bring back that 10-minute, 15-minute intermission, and I'll tell you, they'll make more money. I don't get why they don't do it.
Yeah, and that's something I'd advertise, right? 'Cause you'd probably pull me back in.
My parents tell, when my dad was alive, and my mom will still talk about this story, is one of the very first movies they saw, in Ireland was Gone with the Wind.
Mm, okay.
And Gone with the Wind was literally one of the first movies with an intermission because of how long it was. It was a very movies
Yeah.
used to be shorter, and then they started making them longer and longer, and when the intermission happened, they remember somebody saying, "Oh, it was a good movie, but boy, it was a really odd ending."
That's a fair point.
People had to explain, "No, no, 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 it's not
Yeah.
over yet. It's not over
We
yet."
we watched, sometime in the last 6 months, we watched Lawrence of Arabia just 'cause I hadn't seen it a gazillion years, and it's got
Right,
this
another long
intermission
one.
built in that's got music and I
Oh,
think
is
it's
that
just a
right?
still image, but there's
Right.
music specifically designed for the intermission,
Oh, that's fun.
right, with,
That's
if I remember right, sort of a countdown, but
okay, cool,
it used to
cool.
be like when I was a kid and the intermission would just be clunk, it's almost like
Right.
they just shut the lights off and, said, "Alright, intermission."
Yeah, go
Uh,
get your candy.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think they should bring them back. So Dave,
movie
when we
can
go to a movie and there's an intermission, we're taking credit.
absolutely. In fact, we should go and insist that there be an intermission. Like,
There you are.
when we're
There
at the
you
whole
are.
theater out, and we're like, "No, because we want an intermission, and I need the intermission to be when I need it, not not somebody else." Alright, well, so it's a different kind of empire, right?
Yep,
Not a single brand, but, it's something that, became an empire, of the movie theater,
of the movie theater
industry.
industry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cool. Thanks
yeah,
for
so
that
I thought
story.
alright, super. Thanks, David.
I gotta find some Junior Mints around here somewhere.
Again, in a little box.
In a little box, absolutely. There's always one of the Junior Mints that, like, leaked a little bit and is stuck down in the bottom of the box.
Always.
Always a little vexing, but I love those things. Thank you, Stephen.
Alright, thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.